Hey, you're wide receiver Khalil Shakir, right?
I sure am, kid. Here, go long.
Whoa! You're pretty good at football, man.
And you guys are pretty good at pizza.
Oh, sick.
Dude.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to this Trainwreck Sports podcast, where we are here to pay the bills, and it is playoff time. So let's get it started. No further ado. Joined this week by my co-hosts Mike Partham, Carson Hayek, and Mike. We got a guest today.
Yes, we do have a very special guest. Joining us tonight, the host of the Break Room Morning Show on 96.5 WCMF in Rochester, and co-host of the Let's Go Duffalo podcast. He is a former failed stand-up comedian, an occasional amateur boxer, and Aquinas' own Patrick Duffy. Pat, it's great to have you on. How you doing, buddy?
Guys, I got to tell you, first of all, I really appreciate it. Like, you know, I have the greatest job in the world, but like being on the Pay the Bills podcast has got to be like a top 70 moment for me in my media career. Right. Like, I think it's like, one is with the job I have now. Two is the podcast I'm doing. There was a time where I get interviewed for a local paper when I was 15. That's like in the 30s. One time I called into a radio show when I was like 14. That's like in the 50s. And then you guys like another 10 or 15 behind that. So I really appreciate you guys having me on here.
You finally made it. It took you this long.
I was hoping for top 100, so top 70. You just made my night, man. Made my night in the new year, so we're killing it. It's great to have you, Pat. We're here. It's a special episode because we've made it, Pat. It's time. It's playoff time. We're going to talk about the fans, and we're going to talk about the game and everything else. But I'm going to start with this for all of you. How are you feeling this week heading into the playoff game, Pat? How are you feeling about the Bills?
I feel pretty good, but I am maybe the world's most optimistic Bills fan. Like, I'm always trying to look on the sunny side of things. I mean, if we're talking numbers wise, right? You know, McDermott's record against rookie quarterbacks. You got Bo Nix coming to town. Fantastic. The Bills are undefeated at home. They have not lost a home wild card game under Sean McDermott. Sean Payton comes into Buffalo and gets that weird win last season after the 12 men on the field after the field goal. But you know how McDermott is historically. Once he sees you once, with the exception of like Andy Reid and Robert Saleh, he's got you timed out. All of those things in my head tells me maybe it's not an easy win come Sunday, because the Bills also have a history of bringing it down to the wire at home in wild card football games. But in my fantasy mind, I don't see a way the Bills don't walk away on Sunday with a win.
Pat, I'm right with you. I'm extremely optimistic. With that said, though, hey, it's playoff atmosphere, so that means there's that thin room of error. So that's always going to make me a little bit nervous.
I think we might have to reboot Carson. He's in his Terminator mode right now. That happens sometimes with him, so you have to roll with it. I agree with you, Pat. I mean, I don't have no reason to be unconfident, if that's a word. About obviously, it's probably a word Tommy would invent, one of your co-hosts on the break room. But I mean, the Broncos are no slouch. They've had, I mean, Bo Nix has been described as 2019 Josh Allen. He's got a lot of raw talent. He doesn't have a lot of talent around him currently. My understanding is that they don't have a bell cow running back. Their tight ends are nothing good to speak of. I believe they have, who is it? Cortland Sutton is their veteran wide receiver, and they got a bunch of young guys backing him up. Their defense is really what we're gonna have to be afraid of. 63 sacks this year. Sacks Joe Burrow 7 times. They beat the record held by their Super Bowl 50 team, and that was the one that carried Peyton Manning's broke ass to a second world title. But despite the fierceness of the defense, I think our offensive line is one of our strengths. And even if it turns out to be Swiss cheese against their defensive line, Josh Allen can basically, like he's bullfighting out there, Toro, he can just have guys running right by him and make them look like fools and put them on posters and whatnot. I think there is the potential to have one of those crazy weird games that we've had in the last couple of years, especially given what you mentioned last year, what happened to the too many men penalty, forcing a second chance field goal on the Broncos, which led directly to Ken Dorsey's firing, if we all recall, who also got recently canned by the Browns as offensive coordinator just the last couple of days. So good memories there. But I mean, the Broncos are capable, but the Bills, I think, they just have superior talent. And as good as Bo Nix has seen in flashes, he's no Josh Allen as of right now. He's not MVP level Josh Allen.
For sure.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to go ahead, Carson. I'm sorry, buddy.
No, you're good. Real quick, as I was saying, cautiously optimistic before we had some issues there. I think there's, you slip up once or twice in a game and it costs you, you're in trouble. So that's the part that makes me nervous. But hey, this team's proven it time and time again. They can get the job done this year in any way possible. They've done it in one-score games. They've done it numerous times in blowouts. So I'm optimistic. We're the better football team in this scenario. Chances are the book says we win this game. So does Vegas. So hey, I'm happy. Let's get it going. Pat, take it away.
Well, no, I mean, like, you get into the numbers and you guys bring up Bo Nix. And look, I've watched a couple of Broncos games. He is a lot of fun to watch. I enjoy watching him play football. And you look at the record and it's 10-7. It's really impressive and they're ahead of schedule. But there are two things I think you need to keep in mind when you're looking at the box score scouting, right? First of all, if I'm not mistaken, they played a third place schedule, right? You had the Chiefs win that division, the Chargers in second. So the Broncos come in third after the disaster they've had the last 2 years with Russell Wilson. But most importantly, with the exception of the win against Kansas City's B and C team last week, not only do they only have a single win against playoff teams, they only have a single win over a team that's above 500. That's the Buccaneers in week 3. I mean, the other wins that they have, they beat the Jets, they beat the Raiders, they beat the Saints, they beat the Panthers, they beat the Falcons, they beat the Raiders twice, Browns and Colts. I mean, none of those wins impressed me. Not to mention, you look at that game 2 weeks ago against the Cincinnati Bengals, and I know that people were also getting on this wagon about how great the Cincinnati Bengals offense looked. That Bengals team was not a good team. I'm sorry, man. I'm jumping off that train. I don't know what people were seeing. The reason why Joe Burrow threw for 5,000 yards is because you're frantically trying to come back in every game and you can't finish drives. Like, they were, 3 for 12 in the red zone over their final 3 games? Like, I get how on paper, if you don't dig deep, these teams look a little more even. But I'm really confident in the fact that this Broncos team is not yet ready for prime time.
I actually remember hearing that about the Broncos. Reminds me of, I think, maybe the last year or couple of years of the Miami Dolphins, where we were accusing them of not being able to beat anybody over 500. So maybe the Broncos don't have teeth coming into this game, and we should just not be worried about anything. But I want to put this question to you guys. I believe I put this question to you guys last week, and maybe we'll get a rehash of this week. But Pat, I want your take on this in particular. So depending on when and how the Bills go out, if they do not reach the Super Bowl, if they at least reach the Super Bowl, and we can deal with the consequences of if they do reach the Super Bowl and lose, we figure that Sean McDermott has a lot of rope from then on out, even though Super Bowl losers in the last couple of decade and a half, since the days of our own Jim Kelly, have not fared well coming back the next season. I believe maybe only 1 or 2 teams have gotten back to the Super Bowl within like 4 or 5 years, and one of them was the Chiefs, who had already won a Super Bowl at that point, so who cares at that point? But depending on when and how the Bills go out, if they go out of the playoffs short of the Super Bowl, how much does that affect our perception of Sean McDermott and the team as a whole going into next season? Like, how much hotter does the seat get turned up on McDermott if we go out in a blowout in the wild card game, God forbid, or if we lose a tight one to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game?
It's a really interesting question because, like, you look at, as you put it earlier, the vibes of the fan base exactly 12 months ago. And let's take it up to before the game against Miami, that final game of the season where they win and they're the number 2s and everything. I mean, that Tyler Dunn article coming out really seems to have split the Bills fan base in two, where the Sean McDermott haters used that as fuel and waved it as this is the reason he needs to go. And other folks used it as a way to circle the wagons around him. I mean, Mike, I don't know how, with what McDermott has shown since that article, and quick sidebar, I think Tyler is an extremely talented writer. I really like what he does. He does a fantastic job.
Who recently just had another sit-down interview with Sean McDermott, so that's all water under the bridge, whatever that article, did to him.
And another sidebar, I mean, as someone who has, somewhat hears things and whispers, it seems that McDermott this year, at least going into the season, has really changed the way he approaches the team. Like, he seems like a guy that learns from the mistakes that he's made in the past. He seems more laid back. He seems like less of a control freak. He's letting his guys go do his thing. Sometimes that's to a detriment, special team coaching. But I guess what I'm getting ahead is, I don't know, with what was expected going into this season, the dead cap money from Diggs, not having that guy, one wide receiver and Khalil Shakir on the roster that had even caught a pass from Josh Allen, how even if you were to lose in this wild card game, any suggestion that Sean McDermott could go could even be validated. Like, the guy is the winningest coach in Bills history. He is, in my opinion, a top 5 coach in the NFL. And the more important question, especially as we watch these other teams scramble to try and find new dance partners to fire their head coaches, who's better? Who is better that you could bring onto this roster?
Well, they generally promote from within, so they would probably look for their answers from within. Joe Brady is already getting interviews with 4 other teams: the Jets, the Bears, the Saints, and the Jags, which is a point that you brought up on today's Break Room Morning Show, where could the Bills, if they perform too well on offense, could it be to their own detriment because it might attract one of these teams to hire Joe Brady as their new head coach?
I do feel, I'm sorry, guys. I'm just for an hour. You guys sit there and watch. I do feel like when it comes to Joe Brady, that these teams might be A, doing their due diligence, and B, using this a little bit to try and get information on how the Bills' offense works. I mean, if you look now, and these teams look at the histories of how teams perform under certain offensive coordinators. Brian Daboll makes the playoffs in his first year as a Giants head coach, wins 9 games over the next 2. How he and Joe Shane weren't fired in New York is mind-boggling to me, but Josh Allen made him a head coaching candidate. Ken Dorsey, but Joe Brady, I mean, if you look at what happened with Daboll, I think that there are GMs and owners that'll say, okay, yeah, he looks like he knows what he's doing, but how much of that is Josh Allen being Josh Allen, and how much of that is Joe Brady making Josh Allen's life easier?
It's true. That's a great point. It seems that way. Going back to the McDermott point that you were mentioning, and that's, I mean, everything that I've seen and read and heard and everything, it lines up with that. And you can kind of just see it the way he's even like approaching interviews and everything. It's like he's cracking jokes, bro. Like he's making plain jokes in press conferences in December. Like that is not the press conference we would have gotten last December. So it's a noticeable change. And I think that it's not one player's fault from the last. We were talking about this last week with Mike. It's not one player's fault. Like, this isn't a Diggs thing. This isn't a Poyer thing. This isn't any of those one guys. But there was so much weight on as we talked about a little bit last week, there was so much weight from those guys for their past failures that all this young core did not want to carry that trauma or did not need to. And that's kind of, I think, contributed to the looseness of this team too, is it is a new group. It's a new leadership group. Really, the only constant is Josh, and Josh didn't really want to Josh doesn't want to be weighed down by anything. Josh just wants to go out there, play football with his boys, and just go have a good time out there. Like, that's all he cares about. You know what I mean?
Well, I do think it gets to a point where you are so young in this league that you don't know what you don't know. And I think you're seeing that in the emergence of Khalil Shakir after working with Eric Moulds in the offseason. I think you definitely see it with Keon Coleman. Like, that guy's just out there to have a good time and go catch balls. And, with the changes we've seen in McDermott, to your point about differences in interviews, when he did that snow angel after the Niners game, I thought he had hurt his back. Like, I thought he just fell down. I didn't know what the heck happened there. But, like, those vibes with McDermott, and then the way that Josh Allen just wants to go out there and have fun without, whether it was Diggs, whether it was the pressure coming from the outside, whether it was a feeling that McDermott wanted to be all business all the time, it feels like whatever wall was there has been taken down, and I think it's to the benefit of this roster.
Oh, for sure. No doubt about it. I think you guys brought it up perfectly. Him being a little bit more loose this year, I think directly correlates and mirrors the change in culture and where this team is trying to go. When you lose off of that 13 seconds years ago, that is a really hard thing for your core to mentally get past, because you were that freaking close to sending your team to the AFC Championship game. Who knows what happens after that? But they're human too. They hear everything from the outside noise, regardless of how hard they try to block it out. But when you're that close, and it just it's a snowball. It's hard for it not to be a snowball effect, and that's what it was. And I think this year, not that the players were selfish beforehand, but the sum is greater than one mentality and effect that has had on this team has really, I think, correlated and mirrored what Sean McDermott's trying to preach with how he's being a lot looser, like we said, with the jokes and the press conferences, the snowballs, the snow angels. I would have never dreamed of Sean McDermott doing that 2-3 years ago. I mean, when I saw that, I'm like, who is this guy? How much did he get paid for that and the post game? But I'm enjoying it as someone who played very recently. I've always enjoyed a coach that has, one, been able to get on you, but two, has that loose side and is able to be a player's coach at the appropriate times. And I think he's doing that. He's finding a very good, healthy balance and learning from his past mistakes.
It's not exactly eating dog biscuits or skydiving, but for him, it's pretty good.
Yeah, and I mean, you wouldn't want to eat dog biscuits while skydiving because you're probably going to choke. Although, it's interesting you bring up like the competitive part and everybody eats. There is one little thing that no one's really talked about that has come up a couple of times in press conferences. Because, I know that everyone's sick of the whole Stefon Diggs talk, but it does seem that him wanting to be the focal point of that offense led to more friction. The competitiveness in that receiver room led to more friction than it did success. But there have been a couple of times where both Joe Brady and Sean McDermott have brought up the running back room. James Cook, Ty Johnson, and oh my God, why am I blanking on 22? Thank you. Jeez, what is wrong with me? I've been up since 2:30. I'm sorry. And Ray Davis. And there have been a couple of comments, and I'm paraphrasing, where how competitive the guys are. They'll be on the sidelines, not upset that their teammate is succeeding, but upset that they're not getting their touches. And I find it interesting how when that comes to a receiver core, that ruins your team. And we've seen it on a bunch of different rosters in the past, yet it seems to be driving these three running backs to be all having career years at the same time.
You got a good psychological study on your hands, Pat. I don't know how we commission this or get this going, but there's something with wide receiver, like the mentality it takes to be a wide receiver in the NFL that contributes to this. Like, it's too many examples, like you've said, over history, and it happened again with the Bills. Like, it is like there, and you got outside of Diggs, you had Gabe Davis, who by all accounts consummate teammate, everybody loved him, everything. But a guy who was very worried about his touches because he had a contract year. Like, and I don't blame him. Like, you go into a year without an extension, that should be the top thing on your mind. Like, that's the thing that I don't think that a general fan, not even just Bills fans, a general NFL fan gives enough credence to, is that those guys, a lot of guys, you have to look at their situation personally to understand how a season goes a certain way. I'm very wary of contract year guys in all sports. Like, if a guy in an NBA team starts putting up like 25 points a game all of a sudden and it's his contract year, that guy's probably scoring 18 the next year. Like, it's happened so many times. But that puts pressure on a guy too. And I think that contributed to it too. You got a guy who's looking for a contract who thinks he's a bigger target of the offense than he is. You've got a bona fide number one of the best receivers in the league who should be a focal point of most offenses in the league to be successful, but it clearly wasn't the healthiest thing for this team, and not what McDermott, how much annoyingly did we hear complimentary football last year? Like, and it was to a point beating it to death. Like, what is this? And this year they have 30 passing touchdowns, 30 rushing touchdowns. Like, and I don't think they're playing complimentary football this year, but the offensive side, they've achieved that because their special teams is so bad. You already made the Matthew Smiley joke. I think we could have all figured that out. But the offense is balanced and complementing itself in a way that I think McDermott has dreamt of for 7 years, honestly, since before Josh Allen even showed up. And that's a credit to them rooting out the problem that they needed to, even if it was a year earlier than people thought they expected it to. And it doesn't mean that they all hate Diggs and they all, whatever it is, but that chemistry balance is just so particular sometimes.
Well, there is a third theory that we could explore as to why things are going exactly the way McDermott wants this year as opposed to others. Because if you look at the coordinators McDermott has had in the past, and we'll start with Daboll on offense, right? Like, Daboll is not a guy that came up with Sean McDermott. Talented guy, good offensive mind, has success with Josh Allen, but there's friction there. And then same with Leslie Frazier. He's got more experience in the NFL. They seem to have gotten along, but there were points where McDermott took the play calling duties away from Leslie Frazier, gave them back. There was friction there sometimes. Ken Dorsey spent some time with McDermott, but he was doing everything McDermott wanted, and it wasn't working. Both Bobby Babich and Joe Brady have experience for years with Sean McDermott. And I think it is a possibility that the influence of loyalty to this guy that has given them the opportunity to be a coordinator of the NFL at a relatively young age, they could be behind closed doors doing exactly what McDermott wants them to do, whereas Daboll was pushing back, Dorsey may have been pushing back, Leslie Frazier with his experience may have been pushing back. Like, we make the comment earlier, like maybe Sean McDermott isn't the control freak he was before. Maybe the reason he's so laid back is because he's got all of the control right now because those are his guys.
I never thought of that, but that could be that's brilliant, honestly. That's brilliant, honestly, because I can speak to that pretty solidly. That Leslie Frazier was like that. It was Leslie's defense at that point, and then I think that's why you get the overcorrection of McDermott last year. to be like, no, I have to do absolutely everything on defense. Now Babbitt's probably doing the game planning. He's probably doing all the legwork and everything, but I'm sure Sean has way more of his hands on that defense than people are giving him credit for. And he's happy to give Babbage the credit. He's happy to let him get the hype and let people consider that. But I like that, Pat. Maybe it is. Maybe he's scratched all the itches he needs to control this football team, and it's what they needed.
I do want to say I have no information that indicates that in any way.
No, I know.
Out of the dome, just out the dome, guys.
That's a good theory. I like that.
All right, I want to put a question to you guys. Another like a hypothetical. This was being put up by the morning show over here at WGR 550, the morning show guys. As far as what would be a worse fate for the Bills, or a less desirable fate, shall we say? And by the way, I by no means think that Sean McDermott would ever get fired, regardless of whatever result comes to these playoffs. I'm just saying that if it comes out to be a blowout to the slightly less, lowly, I wouldn't say lowly, but mid Broncos, especially despite being in a year where there wasn't a lot of expectations, and Sean McDermott might as well should be nominated for Coach of the Year for getting this team to where they have been, despite the expectations. But of course, we all know it's just Josh Allen carrying him on his back, MVP season and all. But what would be the less desirable for us? An early exit from the playoffs via the divisional round for another straight year in a row, or we make the AFC Championship again, which we haven't been to in a few years, but we run into, again, the Kansas City Chiefs and lose to them for however many consecutive times. Would we rather lose in the divisional playoffs again or lose to the Chiefs again? Because now they're not going to be one and the same this year.
I think that's a gimme. I think it's got to be the Chiefs, because Mike Bunt brought this up, and I never really thought of it, but I had the last week to think about it. If the Chiefs win it again, like, to be honest, who really gives a shit? Like, at that point, it's just like, okay, they're just next level. They're a dynasty. It's easier to wrap your head around as a fan than if we lose in the divisional to the Ravens. The Ravens beat the Chiefs, and the Ravens make the Super Bowl. Then it's like kind of a us factor, is it not? Because other teams have proven they can get past the Chiefs. To this point, it's been the Bengals, but that almost seems kind of like a fluky thing where, hey, the Chiefs gave that one up. They had the game in hand. They fumbled it, and then the Burrow and the Bengals just took it from there. So for me, it's got to be that, and you're also closer to the Super Bowl one game. That right there in itself gets you mentally thinking, okay, we were one game away, but hey, still, it's this damn dynasty team we can't get past. And hey, that's just going to be a challenge for years to come, rather than really you have to take a really deep look in the mirror and be like, okay, other teams beat KC. What are we doing wrong that consistently, time and time again, it gets to the playoffs where other teams can do it, but we just can't? So for me, it's obviously losing to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. As much as I hate it, I think it's the easier hypothetical.
I'll go bigger picture than Carson, because if I'm not in a universe where the Bills are winning a Super Bowl or multiple Super Bowls with Josh Allen and Sean McDermott, then I'm fine to live in the universe where the Chiefs have won 10 Super Bowls and nobody got past them and they were just the dynasty, and we can be the Wilkins to the Jordan, whatever thing you want to be. If that's a scenario and it's just you can't get by the Chiefs, that's better than, like you just said, the Ravens getting by him and then the Bengals maybe getting by him and the Bills just losing in all these different scenarios in my mind.
Okay, so from a fan aspect, I'm with you guys there where it's a tap-in, right? Like you want them to get to the AFC Championship. However, from a team psychological standpoint, I think that's where the more interesting conversation shows up. Because like we spoke about a second ago, right? Like the expectations for this team going into the season was, from the experts, they were going to finish third in the division. It was a reloading year. I mean, even, Brandon Beane in training camp was like qualifying everything with reloading year, like just in case things go bad. I got this on tape, guys. I'm saying these things. If you lose to the Broncos, yes, it sucks. And yes, there's going to be all those people coming after Josh Allen on social media, MVP, blah, 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 blah. But I think what people have failed to remember, only because this season has been so fun, is the great situation the Bills are in cap-wise, draft pick-wise, and roster-wise next season. True. So if you were to ask me, like, you have the opportunity to go out and make this team better next year, I would think that it would be easier to do that, and this sounds weird, psychologically losing in the first round of the Broncos than it would be losing again to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship, because you brought up, Carson, the 13 seconds a couple of years ago and what that does to make your team chase. I would be worried that you would be breaking McDermott's brain, that you would be breaking Josh Allen's brain, that you would be taking guys like Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard and putting it in their head that you will never beat them in the playoffs. Like, go reload your roster again, somehow make this team better than almost set a record for wins in a season for the team, and give them your best shot next season.
So are you saying that it would almost motivate them more to spend that cap on some big free agent acquisitions if they were to go out earlier than, the AFC Championship game?
I wasn't saying that, but I like that take way better. I'm going to take that take and say I was saying that, Mike.
I like that take too. Steve Noble agrees with your takes too, Pat. He says I think he could drink a beer and hang out with you. Your minds are very similar about the Bills here. So you want to set up with Steve? We can hook you guys up.
I've been saying for
years.
We
do. We bring people together.
I've been saying for years that Steve Noble's the coolest guy that I've ever heard of in my life. Although the fact that he agrees with me makes me think he's also a psycho. So, Steve, I'm sorry. I want no part of you, buddy. I'm not going anywhere.
Well, if you pay attention to the Break Room Morning Show, very often they will announce that someone from the Break Room will be hanging out at the Bill Gray's Tap Room in on Sundays or Saturdays whenever game day happens. It just happens to be at Sunday at 1 p.m., which is a very convenient time, of course.
He'll be there this week. And, I got my Bills season tickets. So as long as the Bills have home field, I won't see anybody there, which is sad, but also awesome for me as a Bills fan. So
that's a great establishment. I've been there plenty of times. One of my best friends living out there. Love that place. But all right, yeah. So
let me ask Pat. We were talking about the vibes of the fan base. You host the Let's Go Duffalo podcast, which is a Bills lifestyle podcast. You generally talk about the etiquette of being at the stadium, being at tailgates, being at watch parties and such. What's the general vibe you've gotten from the fans this season? Obviously, it's higher than most fans, and obviously the experts' expectations have been. But compared to previous playoff runs, is it basically this season found money essentially?
Well, I mean, found money is an interesting way to put it. I don't disagree with that idea. I think what's unique about this season, as opposed to seasons that we've seen with McDermott in earlier years, there was no time to be frustrated as a Bills fan, because you win those first 3 games and you go, holy cow, this team is better than we thought. You lose to Baltimore, but you're hurt. Okay, that's a good team. Fine. You lose to Houston. That one stings because of Stephon Diggs. But again, there's a hurt situation. It's the first year in a long time that the Bills haven't had to frantically win 3 or 4 games over the last 5 to guarantee that they were going to win the division, right? So, yeah, the loss to the Rams stinks, but it might be an aberration, fingers crossed. I think that the vibes are higher than ever, and I do want to point out that I'm 38, so I should not be using the term vibes in the way that I'm using it.
That's great.
We'll allow it here.
Thank you. Yeah, there wasn't the time to get upset with McDermott or Josh Allen in the defense, because when it came to crunch time, the Bills were winning the games they had to win.
So basically, they had their annual mid-season swoon somewhere around late October, middle of November. Now they've had it in week 4 and 5, and we got that out of the way, and now it's been smooth sailing for the most part ever since, basically, right?
I can put it concise this way. Every win, except for the Rams win, was an understandable loss, where in the last 3 previous years, there were maybe 2 or 3 losses every year where you were like, what the hell is going on
Broncos game last year included, yeah.
Broncos game
Philadelphia.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah, those games. What are we doing? What are we doing here?
Yeah.
You were afraid of the Bills at any time could just shoot themselves in the foot. And now this year, you don't necessarily get that. We got beaten by a superior team at that time. The Houston game could probably fall under that category. Like, if this play would have been different or that play would have been different, we'd have beat them. And maybe the Rams to a certain degree. But, yeah, it's been mostly win, bump in the road loss, win.
I'm sorry. Josh has played so out of his mind, too. Like, even when the games don't go entirely smooth, like, there is a play or 2 every game where you're just like, oh, my God. And the play is so remarkable that it's almost like, Total Recall, where it wipes your brain completely when it's happened, because you're just watching Josh do that thing in your head over and over and over again.
I think that's how I watch most Bills games now, is Total Recall, where I'm just like, oh yeah, the Bills did something cool. Like that. Oh, they scored 10 points in the third quarter. That's okay, because Josh just did something crazy, so he'll do that for 31 points the rest of the game. And sometimes he does. That's the thing, though, is like we have so many examples of them just pulling games out of their ass, like, and Josh specifically, that it's like you have to have somewhere deep down the, unless you're the biggest pessimist in the world, which I do. There are plenty of Bills fans that are that way, that somehow he's going to do something in this game to get them back into it. And mostly they are. They don't get blown out. Like when they get blown out once every like 20 games. Like that's really what we're talking
It's
about.
crazy.
Well, before Baltimore, the last time they got blown out was what? A Colts game like a few
Carson
years
Wentz
ago.
led Colts team, yes.
Yeah. Jonathan Taylor had like 200 yards rushing or
4
something like that in
tutties.
the game.
Yep.
But like, I mean, if you want to use a game as an example, right? Like opening game against Arizona, like I'm sitting in the stadium in my seats and I'm watching the Cardinals just run roughshod over the defense, and I'm there with my brother and I'm looking at him like, what's happening here? Oh my God, this season's going to be a disaster. And then Josh just takes over in the fourth quarter, and right in front of my seats, right? You're hurtling over Budda Baker, breaking your hand, and still scoring a touchdown. And that's all I remember from that game is just that hurdle over Budda Baker for a game-winning touchdown.
It's amazing because, like you guys brought up, it was in years past. It's been you had to win against Miami last year to win the division. Years before that, Allen had to clutch up in the fourth quarter in New England at Gillette. So for it to be locked and sealed up in, what was it, around Thanksgiving time, early December, that is so nice to have because, one, that removes a lot of the pressure in that organization, and two, it allows you to test a few things out schematically. It gives you the freedom to do those types of things where, hey, if we're not, running the football correctly, we can, and this is all like, for example, we can try this, try that. Schematically, it frees so many things up. Defensively as well, your players, it loosens them up as far as health it goes, and especially in a few of those blowout games where you can just throw guys in there. I mean, Josh has 100 less snaps or something like that on Lamar Jackson.
Yeah,
and that goes for other starters too. That's not just even on Josh. So to be able to have that time where you can watch some of the guys behind you who you're best friends with and you go to war with them, go in there and thrive a little bit. That is such a great feeling. That improves the culture. So everything about that, just there's so many added benefits to being able to lock that up because, one, you're good, and two, the rest of the division is terrible. So that is an added benefit and something that can really provide us some support here down the road.
One other added benefit this particular season is our defense is not a mash unit being held together by silly putty and duct tape this time around. Matt Milano seems to be a go. Terrell Bernard seems to be on his feet. We're not calling guys off of their couches, in the middle of their hitchhiking routines or wherever the heck they are. It looks like, everybody, all hands on deck for the defense at the very least. Even if the defense hasn't been performing up to their standards of the last few years, at least we have all the guys we're supposed to have out there.
No, Mike, I mean, you make a great point. This is the healthiest this defense has been going into the playoffs in the last 4 years, right? And I'm glad you brought up the whole, coming off their couch. I don't think Bills history will remember how impressive it was what AJ Klein was able to do for the Bills at the end of last season, because he was literally sitting on his couch. He had not played football since August in preseason games, and that dude walked in for the last regular season game, won them a playoff game, and had the Bills within 3 points of the Kansas City Chiefs to go to the AFC Championship game in Baltimore. Had not played a season. And he was doing it next to Dorian Williams and who's the Tyrell Dodson, right? Who were also unseasoned NFL players at that point. Like that scheme, that defensive scheme that the Bills run should be studied for generations after McDermott is gone, because whoever they put in that position, you're not going to get dominant numbers from one individual player, but it's the everybody eats mentality of defensive football. Somehow, no matter who is there, the majority of the time, it works.
It is incredible at mitigating risk. Like there's so many answers that they have on the field, and that's why only the best of the best can do something against it, because there's like one or two things you can exploit in a given game, and it is crazy. It's beautiful to watch.
Speaking of getting guys off the couch, are we a little surprised that Micah Hyde hasn't been essentially activated or been
I think he was here. He's here to get a ring.
We all had the expectation that they're saving him for November and December, and once playoff season starts, it's only going to be like a quarter of a season that he's going to have to play at his age, and he'll just come in for whoever they feel isn't quite up to Micah Hyde standards when he's at playing at 100%. But it looks like he's just content, or at least the coaches are just content with him being a reserve player coach.
Oh, for sure. He's definitely on the team. He's trying to chase that one last ring. He's going to most likely call it a career the end of the season. And it's such an added benefit, like you said, player coach, to have a guy who's been in this system for 7 years now. He's able to help the guys out as far as, veteran experience goes when you see this, when you see that. And really, the thing that stuck out, not to backtrack, but whenever one guy goes down, one way or another, this defense finds results. I think it was Jeremy White who posted it on Twitter today, 31st when it comes to forcing a punt, but they're second in turnovers. So one way or another, they create a difference-making play. And when you're able to have a scheme like that and guys who've been in that scheme for a while now in certain aspects in the position, that helps. And in the areas where you're inexperienced, like safety, for example, having Micah Hyde help coach some of those guys, that's invaluable. That's stuff that it's so nice to have somebody like that to help teach, learn, and take it from there, because that is so exponential when it comes to development.
Mike, going back to the question of did you think Micah Hyde would be active for the playoffs, I was convinced. I mean, if you listen to the Let's Go Duffalo podcast, which you can get anywhere you find your podcasts, or follow us on social media at let's.go.duffalo. Quick.
And on the Odyssey app.
Thank you, Mike. I'll cut you your check later. No, if you listen to that show, my brother and we do the show. My brother was convinced that he was just there to be a player coach. And there is a 30-minute segment that exists from about a month ago where I mercilessly make fun of him for being a rube. Like, just destroy him at a soul level for thinking, like, why would they bring him back just to be a coach? We made a bet of $1 on it. And then even after that, I continued to make fun of him. So
right?
What's that?
That's called a Mortimer bet, I think. $1.
Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. Mortimer bet. I think these guys are too young to get it. However,
I'm 43, by the way, so I'm even older than you to get it.
However, I'm going to have to do the show with him tomorrow. We tape on Wednesdays, and I'm looking into ways I don't have to do the show with him because he will be deservingly ripping me apart for absolutely being right that they just brought him in to be a guy in the room.
Another day in the life of brothers.
What can you say?
I get that, man. I love it.
We've been talking now for 37 minutes, and we've barely mentioned the Broncos. That's how unworried I guess we are about our opponent on the wild card Sunday.
We're great, Mike, because I was just going to say we should probably talk about the Broncos just a little bit and just a little bit more of this game. We touched it at the beginning, but let's do it. Let's do prediction style here. Let's do what we always do, but let's talk a little about this game and kind of work through it here, because I'm leaning towards a Bills 11-point win right now, a 31-20 game. I think here's where I'm looking at this game, just handicapping it. The issues I see that the Bills could have, the biggest issue I could see the Bills have and arising in this game is Sean Payton is a genius. If Sean McDermott is a genius, Sean Payton is equal to him offensively, and that's a huge reason Bo Nix has looked good this year. Now, Pat, you made the point very early on in this show that is my biggest point, is the Broncos ain't played not a damn team this year, or not beat a damn team this year. They have not really played or beat a good team. You can talk that Bucks game week 3, those teams aren't the same as they were. And I believe Mike Evans, I don't know if Mike Evans was in that game or not. I don't know if that's when he was hurt or not. Regardless, it's not a murderer's row of teams that they beat. They beat up a bunch of the worst teams in the NFL. So this team, who knows? Like, this game could get away very quickly. The Bills could outclass them and everything. But I think that their offense, specifically their offensive line, is their strength. And Nix is a smart player, and he's going to listen to Peyton. And so if they can extend the game, run the clock down under 5 seconds, run the ball effectively, keep Josh Allen off the field, this game's going to be closer than Bills fans want it to be. That being said, Bo Nix, this is the biggest game of Bo Nix's life. I watched Bo Nix for 6 years in college. 6, legit. Like, started as a freshman or a sophomore at Auburn, transfers to Oregon. Awesome quarterback, incredible talent. Loves to throw the ball away in big games. He gets tight. He is a chaotic quarterback. Like you said, Pat, earlier, he's fun. Like, he's not afraid to grip it and rip it. But I've watched him in plenty of big games in his college career grip it and rip it in a way that we used to criticize Josh Allen for, honestly. Like, those are the types of games Bo Nix can have in big moments. There's plenty that you can go find. So, I don't know. Maybe he's a different guy. Maybe that's not going to creep out. But it's the major thing that I held against him coming into it when I was looking at this quarterback class. So I think that could creep its head. I think that McDermott will handle it. I think that the Broncos defense shows up a little bit in this game because they have an incredible pass rush and one of the best corners in football, maybe him or Christian Benford, the best corner, and Patrick Surtain. So I do think the offense won't be able to, they're not putting up 40 or anything, but I think 31-20 is where I'm landing at.
That's a good take. I'm similar on that. Bo Nix, he's got a lot of college experience, but when the moment gets big, he's a little bit of a different ball player. Could he be different? Sure. I've been thoroughly impressed with his play the last few weeks. He's been lights out. Their defense, phenomenal. Number 1 in the league in sacks. their goal is going to be to contain Josh Allen, eliminate him rolling out right. But I've seen Josh Allen. I've seen this trick too many times before. Here comes this big, strong defense. Doesn't matter when you're playing the Bills. Joe Brady in this offense has been ready, dialed in all year long. They get that 1 week rest against New England for a majority of the starters. So to me, I think it comes down to making one play on defense, because this defense is the definition of bend but don't break. And with Sean Payton, he can eat that up. So I'm looking for actually a play on special teams. As much as Pay the Bills pod has given Matt Smiley the work this year, I'm smelling a big play from special teams. Give me the Bills in this one, 38-27.
Well, just to give an overview of everything I've learned about the Broncos, they've had some key additions on their defensive line contributing to the 63 sack season. Malcolm Roach is a defensive tackle. They traded for John Franklin Myers from the Jets. They're helping the other guys to face less double teams. The defensive coordinator, Vance Joseph, apparently blitzes at the 4th highest rate in the league. So Josh Allen is going to be facing some live bullets in this game. Like I said, they sacked Joe Burrow 7 times in that meeting with the Bengals. Their linebackers apparently are vulnerable to splash plays, especially running backs coming out of the backfield. So we might be seeing a big pass catching game from Ty Johnson here. They're also very weak against tight ends going over the middle. In the secondary, Patrick Surtain is a great lockdown corner, but he, of course, with the everybody eats mentality, he doesn't have one wide receiver to focus on. It's like pick your poison here. And on the opposite of him, Riley Moss is coming out of a post injury the last couple of weeks, and he's struggling a little bit. And also, he's on the same side of the field as safety PJ Locke, who was also considered a weak spot. So hopefully Joe Brady can learn to exploit those guys. On the offensive side, Marvin Mims, he was underutilized by Sean Payton early in the season for whatever reason. Even the Broncos fans and content creators can't figure out. But he is one of their good weapons. He's used in reverses and gadget plays and those sort of things. He's also their punt returner. He's averaging a league best of 15 yards per play in punt returns. So that's something we're going to have to watch out for. Smiley's going to have to account for that if he can. But they don't have any middle of the field playmaking tight ends. The running back room is a mess. They don't have a bell cow. Cortland Sutton is basically the only wide receiver of note, and their receiving core is a bunch of young guys with him. And Bo Nix, getting to him is going to be a little bit of trouble. He's only been sacked 24 times, so they're going to be able to protect him really well. But I don't see too much teeth on this team outside of their defense, which I think Josh Allen can contain their pass rush. So I have the Bills winning. I have the Bills covering, and I say they're going to win in a blowout.
That was for you and me, and I appreciate that, Mike. That was fun for both of us. All right, listen, all those things you said, great information, Mike, great information. But as a degenerate gambler, I don't listen to numbers. I look at trends. And there are 2 things I would like to bring up here. First of all, as a trend guy, can we agree as a foursome here that the Bills really established themselves as a force in the NFL starting in the 2020 playoffs, the Indianapolis wildcard game? Is that fair?
Fair.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's look at trends here. 2020 playoffs, you beat the Colts by 3 points at home. 2021 playoffs, you blow out New England in the perfect game. 2022 playoffs, you play a 3-point game at home in the wildcard weekend against Skylar Thompson, the Miami Dolphins. Last season, although it was a little tight up front, you blow out the Steelers 31-17, which means it is once again time for a tighter game within what the point spread is. Now, at this moment, the point spread is at 8.5, and that brings up the second trend I would like to point out. It seems over the last couple of years, the wider the point spread, the tighter the Bills' victory. The less the Bills are favored by, the more points they seem to blow teams out by. And here is what could get a little bit scary and what we need to watch out for as Bills fans. The Bills, when double-digit favorites, have this freakish tendency to lose games straight up. Mm-hmm. It's the weirdest thing. And I had the numbers a couple of weeks ago. I don't have them in front of me right now. As long as the line stays under 10, I am confident to see Bills win. But I do think at 8.5, Denver covers in a backdoor cover. I have the Bills in control most of the game, a 14-point lead with 90 seconds to go, or maybe even a 16-point lead with 90 seconds to go. And the Bo Nix are describing frantically making plays, scores a touchdown within the last 30 seconds. Maybe we have to live through an onside kick, but I do have the Broncos covering what is right now an 8.5 and a backdoor cover.
What do you think we should do to get that cover down that line down a little bit. Should we send Vegas like false X-rays of Josh Allen's throwing hand? Hey, it doesn't look too good. I don't know if he's going to be able to throw the deep ball.
Would that change it? Because he had a broken hand all season, and they were still.
Well, is non-throwing hand? Yeah.
Oh, right. I don't know. That's a good question. Mike, you do whatever you have to do to commit fraud in the gambling community. I'm sure that's going to work out just fine for you.
Yeah, probably going to be a good strategy. 8.5 is a tough number right there for that. I don't know if I would. I've just picked 11, but I could see the scenario where it's 31-20, and then that's like everything you're saying, late touchdown, no 2-point conversion, all of a sudden it's a 3-point game, even like any of those situations, any of those scenarios can definitely be a backdoor here with Bo Nix.
I mean, it's almost the way the game worked out against the Broncos last season, if you remember, right? I mean, they drive for that field goal and they miss. If it wasn't for the 12 men on the field, the Bills walk away with it. And again, I don't think that maybe we're uncomfortable up front, right? Where the offense for the Broncos starts moving, the Bills take control the way that they do, and then all of a sudden you have the decision to make in the playoffs. And I am kind of convinced that the reason we've seen so many close wildcard games opening weekend with Sean McDermott and whoever the offensive coordinator is McDermott, once he feels like the game is in hand and he's comfortable with his team, starts to pull back on what they're going to show because he knows they've got Kansas City to see. He knows they've got Baltimore potentially to see. At years, they had the Bengals to see. Does the same thing happen this year? I mean, do they call the dogs off?
Well, this is this game, and obviously this playoffs is the referendum on our whole McDermott conversation. Because how much have you really changed, buddy? When the chips are down, what do you go back to? Do the old habits die hard, or are you a changed man? Like we're going to see it. There's going to be a decision moment in one of these games where McDermott can either show his true where he's going to be able to show his true colors, and we'll be able to see what that is. And I'm very interested. It's one of the biggest things. Biggest storylines I'm not exactly looking forward to, but interested in as a Bills fan. Like, what does Sean do when that moment comes against Denver, Baltimore, Houston, LA, whoever it is, KC, whoever it is? Like, it's gonna happen. So what does he do? Who knows? I think he's changed. I think he's an evolved coach. I think it's a different situation. Doesn't mean they're gonna win, but
time will tell.
Time will tell.
Amen, Carson. Time will tell.
I did predict the Bills to win the Super Bowl today on Twitter, though. So that's how I'm feeling. And I truly do believe that that's going to happen.
Well, I mean, I again, I'm the most optimistic Bills fan of all time. But like, when you look at the way the season has gone, why not? What do the Bills need to add where you definitely go, well, that's going to make them a Super Bowl champion?
Well, that's the interesting psychological discussion we had earlier. Like, that's what it is to me. It's a mental thing as much as it is anything. And Carson kind of talked about this last week a little bit too. It's these little moments of the game where the Chiefs are just so good at that the Bills just haven't gotten. And what are the margins between these two teams? Like, seriously, the margins are as thin as they possibly could be. Like, we've seen it year in, year out. It's the mental thing, and that's the hurdle I think the Bills got to get over. So I don't know if it is. They might, they could add Jamar Chase in the offseason. I don't know if that would make the difference, because I still think it is not just the Bills that have this hurdle. That's why Bills fans work themselves into a tizzy, arguing with each other about it. Every team is trying to solve this KC problem. Eagles fans don't want to see KC in the Super Bowl. They're terrified of that. Detroit Lions fans, they're hoping that the Ravens or Bills make the Super Bowl. Like, every fan base besides KC doesn't want to see KC.
That's an interesting question you bring up there with the Lions specifically. Let's say the Lions go and they get to choose who their Super Bowl opponent is. After the way the Bills played the Lions, which, again, tiny margins, but the Bills were in control of that game. There was an onside kick that had to be attempted to even give them a shot.
Yeah. Versus
the way that Kansas City has been playing. Do you think, given the choice between the Bills and the Chiefs, that the Lions would choose to play the Bills again?
I'm not sure how much more of a difference it has made for KC's offense recently, but they did get receiver Hollywood Brown back, and they've been, when they've been actually trying to win, they've been blowing out teams a little bit better than these, last second pull a horseshoe out of their ass wins that they have to call upon the gods in order to smile on them with a block kick, or the other team fumbles away their chance to kick a game-winning field goal. It seems like they're coming into their own late in the season, especially Travis Kelce. So I don't know if the Chiefs are going to be as vulnerable as we've seen them through most of the season.
I understand the point there. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jake. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say I do think I'm an optimistic Bills fan as well, Pat. But this is where my optimism ends. Is it's Casey until I see it otherwise. Like that's gonna be the hard part. And I know I just said I picked the Bills, but when we come into that week, I'm gonna be more nervous than ever. And that's the trauma. It's not even the trauma. It's just like I'm looking at the trends of them just winning every time they get, or they've like the floor is losing in overtime in the AFC title game for Patrick Mahomes right now.
Okay, so I'm sorry, you're going to say something before I make my.
No, you're good. I was just agreeing with
ahead.
the parts you said.
Okay, so I will say this: they say, as a boxing fan, styles make fights.
True.
Sean McDermott, you can argue, has not had the playoff success in the past because he has been afraid to be aggressive. I apologize for my dog Biscuit barking. The Mediterranean food is here.
Named after Cornelius Bennett, I should add.
This is true. And Smurless, my Chorky, is upstairs because he's even louder. But I digress. What we're seeing now is a more intelligent, analytical, aggressive Sean McDermott. And the Bills also have a way to mitigate the threat of aggressive head coaches, whereas the Chiefs are a little bit susceptible to coaches that are just like throwing it to the wind. Dan Campbell is that coach. I could see a scenario where Dan Campbell and the way he likes to play offensive football has more success against a guy like Andy Reid because he doesn't care. Dan Campbell is reckless. I don't care who you are. I'm going to go play my kind of football, whereas every other coach afraid to lose to the Chiefs puts their foot on the gas, and that's what costs him the game. I think that's why maybe they would choose Kansas City over Buffalo.
I can see it.
Dan Campbell seems to be like Rex Ryan with a modicum of sanity and football IQ.
Rex,
Yeah,
he's the
future Jets head coach, Rex Ryan.
God, please do it. Please.
He thinks he's going to get it. Hear him on the radio show the other day, but
Greeny said he thinks he's getting it too. Greeny went on Pat McAfee. He was like, "Yeah, I think it's his job."
The funniest part of this whole thing, it's not the fact they're interviewing him. It's not the fact that he has a legitimate shot. Did you guys see the photo the Jets put out when they said we're interviewing Rex Ryan today?
No.
They used a picture of Fat Rex. Like, the guy looks great. He's on ESPN. He's right here. Like, the disrespect you showed. He's 100 pounds heavier. There are other pictures, man. Are you telling me you told him out of taking the job?
No doubt they just pulled that from their archives because they're lazy and they don't want to use Google for whatever reason. I don't know. Because it's him in a Jets uniform, so I guess it fits. I don't know.
Photoshop goes crazy.
That's tough. Yeah. You could slim him down, cut it off a little bit. I don't know. Get a better angle of him. Something.
He worked hard. He's proud of himself. Give the guy a little bit more slim of a picture.
Hey, if they give him the job, he probably says they can post any picture of him they want, and I'm sure he actually means that, to be honest. So, who knows with him? But all right, so we're on a Bills win. Pat, thank you for joining the Pay the Bills podcast. I hope the experience at least bumped us up to top 65, but we can wait. We'll wait. We'll let you sleep on it 24 hours for your experience there. But thank you again for coming. Get your plugs in before we go.
Oh, sure. You can listen to the Break Room on the Odyssey app. If you're outside of Rochester, it's WCMF.com, the Odyssey app. You can watch us on YouTube, the Break Room WCMF on YouTube or Twitch. If you're in the greater Rochester area, 96.5, 6 to 10, Monday through Fridays. The Let's Go Duffalo podcast, which was voted the best podcast hosted by Irish brothers in the greater Rochester area, focusing on the Bills. Pretty exciting award for us. You can catch that, the Odyssey app, wherever else you get your podcast, and follow us on Instagram and TikTok. My brother runs both of those, and he is the, I don't know, I'll let you decide how talented that kid is when it comes to social media. Let's.go.duffalo. And it was a pleasure, guys. It was so much fun. And listen, if you ever need me again,
send up the Duffy signal.
That's the end of it. I have nothing else to say.
Well, one more thing, guys, since this is the start of the playoff season, I have one more question to ask.
What would you rather be than right here, right now?
You think, not to sound morbid, you think that guy's still alive?
He's going to tailgate Sunday. What you mean? He's going strong off of whiskey and brats, bro.
It's an under 20% chance based on what was on that grill, right? His uncle, I'm sorry. He seems like a great guy, but that's a 30-year-old clip. That guy, oh boy.
He would be defying the odds. That's what this podcast. If we could be talking about anything, this podcast is about defying the odds. Whether it be this man in his meats selection 30 years ago, or the Bills winning the Super Bowl. So that's what we're here to do. But we paid the bills. So for Carson, for Mike, and special guest Pat Duffy, thank you guys, sir, for joining. Thank you guys. This is Jake Micah. Picasso's playoff push is on. We'll be here all week, provide content all the way up to game day and after. So we'll be hoping for a victory Monday, a victory Tuesday. I didn't even mention it's not victory Tuesday. I guess it feels like a victory Tuesday. It's pretty funny that the Patriots won that game. I can't lie. But all right, we paid the bills. Thank you, everybody. Let's enjoy the playoffs. Let's go Bills.